Now, I think she got all your signatures.
Yep.
Yes, she did, and I just need to sign behind them. Yep, she got it all. All right. I'd like to start by asking you basically your journey to San Bernardino, to, I guess I'll say San Bernardino County specifically. And then you can tell me, just like you told me, that you started here in San Bernardino
Okay.
and then where you ended up.
Okay.
And I am probably going to prompt you if there's something that I hear that makes me feel like I want to dig a little deeper
Okay.
in that area. If not, then I'm going to basically let you sort of free flow your story. I see you've told it several times, so you have to have it here.
I'm writing a book.
And it's your story.
Yeah.
So I doubt that I'm going to, I won't stop you many times because it's about getting you in your interview and not necessarily me on tape. So, okay. Ready? I'm supposed to read this script then, aren't I? I'm sorry, I read let me begin again. Here somewhere. Yeah, this is my notes. Okay. I'm gonna add that to it. Okay. Ready, Sarah?
Let me check something real
Okay.
fast. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Carolyn.
This is Carolyn Tillman, and I am interviewing Mr. Jim Busby. Mr. Jim Busby was the mayor of Victorville, and he served for 3 terms beginning in the late 80s. His first name is spelled Jim, Jim. Last name spelled Busby, Busby. We are interviewing here at the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools office. Thank you, Mr. Busby, for taking out the time to conduct an interview with us.
It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you here with us, for sure. So I'm just going to begin by asking you about your journey from Texas to California. Give us the details of how you got from Jim Busby from Texas to Jim Busby, mayor of Victorville.
Okay. Well, I was, of course, born in Houston, Texas, finished high school, Booker T. Washington High School. And from high school, I enrolled at Texas Southern University in Houston, where I attended college for about a year and a half. And this was in the early 60s. So I was drafted into the Army. And I chose not to go into the Army, so I actually volunteered for the Navy. And I entered the Navy, and I came to San Diego, did my basic training. The from San Diego, I was assigned to the San Diego North Island, the Nuclear Weapons Training Center. And I spent a year there, and I found it rather boring because I wanted to actually fight. I wanted to go to Vietnam.
Wow.
So I asked my commanding officer to put me on what we call a swift boat, which is a little PT-looking boat in Vietnam. And he said, well, gee, if I put you on one of those, you'd probably get killed the first day. So I said, well, I want to go. I just want to fight. And the reason that I was so adamant about that is that during World War II, blacks in the Navy could only be cooks. And I wanted to make sure that my background showed that I was a fighting man. So it was very, very important to me. So I was assigned to a ship, a destroyer out of Yokohama, Japan. And so on January 1st, 1965, I went to Japan, caught my ship, and we were home ported in Japan, but this was during the beginning of the Vietnam War. So my ship was one of the first ones that was given an assignment in Vietnam to do what was known as shore bombardment. That was to fire on the batteries on the shore in Vietnam, offshore. We would go in about 2 miles, and we would back up our troops and pick up pilots. And other things we did was we would stop little junk boats. They were running ammunitions down the rivers, so we would stop them and board the ships and search them for ammo. So I spent about almost 2 years in Vietnam. Then I came back to Long Beach. And from Long Beach, I lived there for several years, and then I moved to Cerritos. I had a child, and I moved to Cerritos. And I wanted to make sure that my, at that time, daughter had the best opportunities for education. So Cerritos was a new community. I moved there and stayed there for several years, probably about 10, 15 years. I can't remember exactly when. And during that time, I started working for then what was called TRW. It has now been absorbed or bought out, purchased by Northrop Grumman. And so I was working for TRW Northrop Grumman, living and working in Redondo Beach and living in Cerritos. And I was offered an assignment to come to Norton Air Force Base, where TRW was one of the base contractors for the Ballistic Missile Division. And at that time, I was the manager of subcontracting and purchasing. So I accepted that assignment, which meant that I had to sell my home in Cerritos, and I moved to San Bernardino and purchased a condominium in downtown San Bernardino. And during that time, when I came out here, I found San Bernardino to be an interesting community. And one of the most intriguing thing was that while at TRW, I was the president of a group called TRW Bootstrap, which was a takeoff of Operation Bootstrap out of South Central Los Angeles. South Central Los Angeles, headed by a guy by the name of Lou Smith. And one of the unique characteristics of that was that San Bernardino, at that time, Francis Grice of Operation Second Chance also had a chapter of Bootstrap. So I knew Francis Grice, I knew Wesley Jefferson, and Bobby Vivens, and many of the old timers in San Bernardino. And at that time, they had just resurrected the Dr. Martin Luther King statue in downtown San Bernardino. And I was very, very impressed by that. In those days, that the city actually placed a statue of Dr. King downtown. And I knew that Francis Grice had been very active in making sure that that happened. I think Bob Holcomb was the mayor at that time. So I was very, very interested in that. So I started interacting with Francis Grice and Operation Second Chance, I think is what she headed up.
Yes.
And many of those people, and through that, I ran into a good friend, got to be one of my better friends was Bill Jacobs, Ratibu.
Yes.
And Ratibu was involved in the West Side Action Group, so I got involved in that. And we were meeting in those days at the San Bernardino Boys Club.
Still do.
And actually, I ended up becoming the president of the board of directors at the Boys Club in San Bernardino.
Wow, okay.
I also met during those days Frances Grice. She had not started the PAL Center in those days, and she needed some assistance in
Is that Francis or Mildred Henry?
Mildred Henry.
There you go, okay.
I'm sorry, Mildred Henry, Dr. Henry.
Yes.
Dr. Henry at the PAL Center. And she needed some things like typewriters. In those days, we didn't have computers. That everyone was not computerized. So she needed some things, typewriters and things of that nature. And as manager of procurement and all of that at TRW, one of the things I was also in charge of was surplus. And so we were in the process of switching from one type of IBM typewriter to another. So I was able to convince our management at TRW to donate supplies and typewriters to
Bless you.
Dr. Henry at the PAL Center.
Bless you.
So I got to be very good friends with her. In other words, I was just really got to know the community. I was always interested in politics and just an active community person, and with emphasis on making sure that our black young people had an opportunity to grow.
Yes. So that's San Bernardino, but you ended up in the high desert.
Oh, okay. Well, I decided to move from San Bernardino to Victorville, primarily because the smog had started coming in and I wanted to go up a little higher. It's a little higher elevation, and also I was in the process of getting married.
Okay.
And so my wife at that time was living in Los Angeles, so we moved to Victorville. And I didn't know anything about Victorville. Actually, I was on my way to Las Vegas, and I saw a sign that giving homes at a very reasonable price that I could afford that was near the golf course. So just stopped off and bought a home. I didn't know anything about the school system or anything. It was really a blessing, because when my wife and I got married, she had a son at those days who had cerebral palsy. So he needed special needs kid.
Right.
And so his name was Wayne. He passed a few years ago. And, obviously when you marry a woman, you marry a child. So Wayne became my son. Loved him to death. And so we moved and we enrolled Wayne up there in school. And I was commuting. My wife, by the way, was working at TRW. That's where we met in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So she had prior experience as a GS-12 with the Army. So when I moved to San Bernardino, we got married. She decided to become a civil servant again, and she went to work for the Air Force at Norton Air Force Base. And I was also working there through TRW as a contractor. So we both were commuting from Victorville to San Bernardino, leaving our kid at a special needs up in Victorville. So we did that for many years. And but one of the things that got me interested in politics was that I noticed that there were no blacks on any of the councils in the high desert. And we have 4 cities in the high desert. We had Victorville, Atlanta, Apple Valley, and Hesperia. And I just found it appalling that there were no blacks involved in the government. And I knew that San Bernardino was very progressive because they had a Dr. King statue. We not only didn't have a statue, we didn't have any real black people in office. And so I I knew that I could offer something to the community, and not really emphasizing black. Black was not my emphasis. My emphasis was that I brought a lot of skills as a manager from TRW, and a guy that who was systems trained, who knew how to put things together and make things work. So I thought that if I could get elected and eventually become mayor, then I would be able to integrate and put together a hybrid of the best of business with the best of government. So I really, really thought that I could make a difference. And so I ran. I decided to run for the city council, and the city council, you run for the city council, then from the city council, they elect a mayor. It's normally the top vote getter in the city of Victorville.
Right.
So,
What year was this?
this was 1988, May of 1988. And in those days, we didn't run they've changed the election now to fit the presidential cycle, but it was like an off-year election where you have low turnout and the incumbents always get reelected. Well, I just knew that we could do something different, and
No empty seat.
No, it wasn't an empty seat. And by the way, most of the people that had been in office had been